there, ladies and gentlemen, this is Orphan Last, aka Skylar Madison, and today I wanted to do more with this image of the car interior that I drew last week. And so I decided to draw my mascot into the scene, as well as do some extra inking and coloring for the image. Generally, I've had this specific image in my head of my mascot going through something that I personally experienced. And although I don't really think I'm the best storyteller in the world, I guess I'll tell you guys about it, A few years ago, soon after I started creating art-centric videos on my channel, my car was giving me a bunch of problems, and I was going through all sorts of hell around this point in time. It really just seemed like every day I'd be presented with 50 situations where I'd be up a creek without a paddle, and no one seemed to give a crap. Most especially the girl that I was living with at the time. And it seemed like it was more likely that people would pile on more problems, rather than at the very least be indifferent. It definitely wasn't the worst experience I've ever had. I've been through worse, but I'd say it was about the fourth worst series of months that I've ever experienced thus far. About fourth. It takes fourth place. The only upside was that I've been through enough hell, basically, in the past, that I knew how to deal with at least most of the crap again. I wish I could give you all specifics, but that would just lead into more questions and assumptions, and there's really no point, especially since everything seems to be so politically correct nowadays that no one can say anything without being a horrible person nowadays, so there's no point in even talking about any of it. Even if you're on the right, even if you're the good guy in the situation, you're actually the bad guy because you mentioned something that's politically incorrect or something. Whatever. Anyhow, my car was starting to act up in a...
You're stranded in the middle of nowhere in 115-degree heat.
That sort of way. And we had a friend of the family who was a mechanic, and he'd offer a good price for repairs, and I'd like to stress that. He would repair the car, and I would pay him to fix the car. Okay, so he would be getting a lot out of this as well. Probably more money than he would get from his employer, even. A lot of the time when you go into a mechanic shop, what you're paying for is a bunch of middlemen, the establishment, the rent for the establishment, the profits for the guy who owns the establishment, all of that sort of crap. Basically, I had gone through this family mechanic a couple of times in the past, and I really enjoyed the experience. He was a really nice guy, but I think he got involved with some of the politics that were kind of ruining my life at the time. It's amazing how powerful rumors can be, and how damaging they can be to a person. And to be honest, I think that's really all his involvement was in all of the weird politics that was going on in my life at that point in time. He was probably just the victim of hearing a rumor about me that just simply wasn't true, or something along those lines. But I guess it is possible that he wasn't just jerking my chain around the day that I scheduled to get my car fixed with him. That day, I woke up, drove to work, grateful to whatever forces involved in my car's engine that would allow it to successfully get me to my destination. And once the workday was over and I was off the clock, I gave him a call, and he kept telling me that I should give him a call in an hour, and that he was busy fixing someone else's vehicle, even though I scheduled about a week in advance to be the person that he'd be helping out that day. Now, Utah is a miserably hot place. There are portions of Utah that are every bit as miserable as Arizona and Vegas. So after 3 hours of just hanging around in the hot sun next to the job site, I decided I couldn't take it anymore, and I drove into a strip mall and got something to eat and got hydrated. And every hour I kept giving my mechanic a call asking if I could just drop my car off over at his place, and every hour he kept telling me he's really busy. Until finally the sun went down, and I basically wasted my entire day trying to get this guy to help me out. Even if I could drop my car off over at his place at that point in time, I would have just wound up being stranded in a city that's a 40-minute drive away from where I actually lived. And Utah isn't full of Uber drivers and taxis and such like that. So he'd be working on my car in the morning the following day in this hypothetical situation, while I'd be waking up inside of a hotel or something wondering how I'd even get to work that day. Visualizing this whole hypothetical situation just sucked. So I gave him a final call and told him that I'm just going to take the car into a mechanic shop the following day. I cut my losses and just hoped that my car would last me another day. Just one more day that I could just take it to the mechanic shop. Not to a family mechanic, but to a mechanic shop. One more day just for that. And that's the moment that I slipped the key into the ignition and the engine just wouldn't turn over. I tried tinkering around with the engine a bit, but my mechanical knowledge is kinda limited. I just sat there in my car frustrated with life and thought that my car just needed to cool down more, possibly. But it was a hot night. About as hot as most people would consider a summer day in most places in the world. Like I said, Utah can be every bit as miserable as Arizona and Las Vegas. I pulled out my phone and looked at all the contacts that might be able to help me, and the last thing that I wanted to do was call my dad and get him thinking that I wasn't doing very well. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be calling the girl that I lived with at the time, just simply because I just didn't think she cared. So I made a Facebook post that read, "Please, car, please start." And just kind of zoned out there, sitting in the driver's seat of my car, thinking that if anyone actually reads that post, they're probably just going to think,
"Oh, I've been there."
And they're not even going to think any deeper than that. They won't be thinking any thoughts like,
"Are you in trouble?"
Or,
"Hey, you need help?"
Even if I had been more blatant, saying I'm stranded, can someone help me out, I doubted anyone would even read it. But I waited for a good long while, and once I felt like both the car and I had cooled down enough, I slipped the key back into the ignition, and it started on the first try. And I was able to actually just drive home, and everything worked out just perfectly. I was able to drive to work the next day, and I was able to just drive it to the mechanic shop. Everything worked out just fine the following day. But it was really, really, really difficult to deal with that specific day and night. I know this isn't some sort of story about me conquering anything, but there was a little bit of time there where I was just feeling completely hopeless, where I was just feeling like I was doing everything I needed to do in order to take care of myself, and yet still somehow I fell short. And yet through forces that are always seeming to be beyond my control, things, at least this time, worked out for me. At least a little bit that night. I guess the main reason why this image has been in my mind for so long, at least recently, enough for me to wind up drawing it, is because Facebook basically, it tells you sometimes that you have memories to look back on. And I kind of hate that feature because sometimes it just feels like it's saying,
"You want to see the path of nightmares that led you here?"
I'm still not sure if anyone ever saw that post. And I saw it somewhat recently. And a bunch of just really frustrated experiences just kind of surged through me while reading it. And I keep thinking about that post. And it bugs me every time. Because the thought comes to mind, all of that could always just happen again. Exactly as it did before. And that's right, it really could. This is normally people's cue to say something like,
"You need to meet more people,"
or
"You need to socialize more."
But I'm not all too sure about that. People can be every bit as hostile as they can be helpful. One moment they're great and helpful, the next second they want to kill you. And it's not just one person, it's the entire freaking group. Now, I'm sure that there's some sort of failing inside of me somewhere that I can't identify that is fundamentally detrimental to me when socializing. Maybe there's something I just don't understand. I just don't know. And it's not like I have any after the fact knowledge to tell me what it is for me to know what it is, if that makes sense. It's like some weird mystery. Where's Waldo? Where's the flaw inside of you? But no one's actually drawn it out. And so you're able to look at everything inside of you, but even though you're trying to find Waldo wasn't drawn out. I guess this is also normally people's cue to suggest psychologists or something like that.
Go see a psychiatrist.
But have you ever been to a psychologist? Or therapy, or whatever people call it? Have you ever seen a psychologist just dead set on a diagnosis that you know is nonsense, and yet they keep hammering at it for about a year until they finally realize that they've been wrong the whole time? You ever know anyone who's been in that situation before? I don't know. I can speak for myself. I've run into that literally every time I meet up with a psychiatrist. And when this has happened to me, the structure of the patient-psychiatrist relationship has been completely dismantled. I wind up thinking that they're a moron that I can't trust, that this is just an idiot that wants me to be a lab rat, and he wants me to pay to be a lab rat. And while on the flip side, they think I'm just being stubborn. There's no confidence or trust, so why even bother seeing that same psychiatrist ever again? Like, if you're going every step of the way saying, this does not work, this is not a legitimate diagnosis, you need to come up with something new, and they're just, oh no, ha ha ha, I have a PhD! All confidence kind of just dissolves, and you're just thinking, are you really this stupid? I've been telling you for a whole year this is wrong. I don't know how to really react with a smile on my face at this point in time. Basically, each time I've gone to a different psychiatrist and they've come up with a failed diagnosis, I inform them that several other psychiatrists have tried that before and it was wrong each time then, and it's wrong now. So why even bother trying it again? And then they still persist in wasting my time. They want another year of wasting my time on my dime. And that's when I fire them and tell them that they suck at their job. And then they reply, you can't fire me. But I sure as hell still don't have to pay them, and I sure as hell don't have to see them again. And with experiences like that, and with all the crazy stupid ideas I've seen psychiatrists come up with in the media, I've kind of come up with a verdict for psychology and psychologists. And the verdict is simply that psychology is not a science, and it doesn't appear as though it's governed by the scientific method. Maybe it was at one point in time, but that was brief and it no longer exists. It's merely governed through popular political ideas rather than proven ideas. I anticipate that many people in the next coming years are going to come out of the woodwork and call out about how angry they are at psychology and psychologists for toying with their lives, their emotions, and toying with it for politics rather than with an actual science. I think it'll get society to finally realize that psychiatrists are just doctors that didn't have what it takes to be real doctors, and that they aren't a guru in anything, in any way, shape, or form. They're just a loser that's read a bunch of gibberish that's on par with alien conspiracy theories and flat earth apologists. They might as well be reading a book about where the lost city of Atlantis might be. Generally, most of the people who've ever existed have done just fine, figuring things out on their own, and I guess that's the route that I have to go. I guess this whole story stems off of my difficulty to relate with others, and the difficulty I have in socializing, and maybe the aftermath of it all, with the car not being able to start. On one hand, I like my solitude. On the other hand, I do like having people to turn to. And kinda just, here I am right now, with a growing YouTube channel, and I'm both excited that one day I believe I'm going to actually make it on this platform. I might be supported by this platform. And I'm kind of terrified by that, because that probably means that I'm going to wind up going to all these conventions and hundreds of people are probably going to be quoting things that I've said all alone in my room. And although it seems totally normal for you because you've been watching my videos for years, I don't have the same experience about my videos as you do. To me, it just feels like I'm talking to a microphone that doesn't even look like a microphone. I mean, it's a blue snowball microphone. It looks like some weird sci-fi device. And I'm just kind of scared that maybe one day I'll probably have people quoting what I've been saying when I'm all alone in my room, like those sorts of things, and I'll probably freak out and wind up burning it all to the ground, purely by accident, just simply because I don't know what the hell to do with myself most of the time. I just hope that on that day, if it ever happens, if I lose control somehow, I hope that the channel will be able to continue running in spite of all my flaws and frustrations, just like how the car was able to run in spite of not getting fixed that day, and in spite of me trying to hold everything together. I hope that my cry for help that time around will be understood, and I hope that on that day people will see someone that struggles with themselves as much as they struggle with everything else in their life. Basically, I guess I hope that people will wind up seeing a human being and not just some idol that needs to be destroyed.